All right, let's jump into this deep dive. Um, we're going beyond the music scene this time and heading straight into the heart of Memphis. We're going to be exploring this YouTube documentary called The Homicide Capital of America, Memphis, TN.
Oh, yeah. I've seen that one. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, the title itself is like, whoa.
Yeah, it grabs you right away.
And it makes you think, like, what's going on in Memphis? What makes it statistically one of America's most dangerous cities? And that's what we're going to be unpacking today. We're going to look at those hard numbers. But we're also going to go beyond the statistics and hear those human stories, the actual experiences of people living in these communities.
Yeah, and that's what's so powerful about this documentary. It doesn't just throw numbers at you. It really puts you right there on the streets with the people who are dealing with these issues every day.
So getting right into it, the documentary hits us with some pretty startling crime stats right off the bat.
Yeah, they don't hold back.
Memphis has an overall crime rate that's 37% higher than the national average. It's already a big red flag.
Yeah, and then you look at the homicide numbers and it's like a punch to the gut. Between 2020 and 2024, there were 1,675 homicides in Memphis.
Whoa, that's almost hard to even comprehend.
It's a staggering number. It's not just a statistic. It represents lives, lost families, shattered communities, traumatized.
And the documentary doesn't let you forget that. It brings those statistics to life with personal accounts from residents.
Like, there's this one woman who talks about driving down the street and having to duck because of a drive-by shooting.
Oh, wow.
And she describes it so vividly, you can almost feel the fear and the chaos of that moment. It's a reminder that these aren't just numbers on a screen. This is real life for people in Memphis.
It's a stark reminder that violence can erupt anywhere, anytime. And to understand these challenges better, the documentary takes us deep into specific neighborhoods that are facing extreme difficulties. They really focus on North Memphis.
Yeah, and a few areas in particular really stand out. One that comes to mind is Raleigh.
Raleigh. What's the situation there?
Well, just to give you an idea, the crime rate in Raleigh is 277% higher than the national average.
277? That's insane.
It means you have a 1 in 12 chance of becoming a victim of crime there just by living there or even just being there.
That's terrifying. But wasn't Raleigh like a resort town at one point?
Yeah, it's interesting. You're actually right. Back in the late 1800s, Raleigh was this luxurious resort area with grand hotels and even a dedicated streetcar line.
Wow. So how did it go from a resort town to a crime hotspot?
Well, like a lot of places, Raleigh faced economic hardship over time, jobs disappeared, housing quality declined, and the area just spiraled downwards.
It's like a classic example of how those socioeconomic factors can contribute to a rise in crime.
Exactly. And the documentary also points to this chilling event in 1912 called the Madoc Seminary Fire.
What happened there?
Well, this seminary, a school for girls, caught fire, and tragically, a lot of young women lost their lives. It was a devastating event for the community.
And some see it as a turning point for Raleigh.
Like a foreshadowing of the troubles to come.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Makes you wonder if that event kind of broke the spirit of the community in a way.
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely an interesting theory.
Another North Memphis neighborhood that the documentary focuses on is Frazier.
Oh yeah, Frazier. That's another area where the risk of becoming a victim is really high.
Even higher than Raleigh.
Yeah, it's actually a 1 in 10 chance of becoming a victim of crime in Frazier.
Wow, those are some sobering statistics. It really puts things into perspective.
And the documentary doesn't just rely on numbers to tell the story. They feature interviews with residents who share their firsthand experiences.
What kind of things do they say?
Well, there's this one resident who talks about how they remember their childhood in Frazier as a time when they felt safe and supported.
Oh, so it wasn't always like this?
No, it wasn't. But this resident talks about how things have changed and how there's this lack of guidance and opportunity for youth today.
That's heartbreaking to hear.
It is. It's like the sense of hopelessness has become pervasive, and it's contributing to the cycle of violence.
It's a reminder that these issues are so much bigger than just individual choices. It's about the systems that are in place, the lack of resources, the breakdown of community.
Absolutely. And the documentary really highlights the role of economic hardship, specifically pointing to the closure of the International Harvester plant in 1985.
Oh, yeah, that was a major employer in the area, right?
It was. That plant provided jobs and stability for so many families in Frazier. And when it closed, it had a devastating ripple effect throughout the community.
It's like pulling a thread from a tapestry and watching the whole thing unravel.
Yeah, exactly. It leads to widespread unemployment, financial instability, and all those things create fertile ground for crime to take root.
It's a tragic cycle. The documentary also spends some time in Binghamton, another North Memphis neighborhood, struggling with a high crime rate.
Yeah, Binghamton is interesting because it's got this kind of duality going on.
What do you mean?
Well, on one hand, you've got Broad Avenue, which has seen some revitalization efforts, and it's become this kind of cool arts district.
So like galleries and cafes and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's trying to reinvent itself.
Hmm.
But then on the other hand, Binghamton is also known for some really horrific crimes that have made national headlines.
Yeah, the documentary covers some really terrifying
Yeah.
incidents, like the 2004 random shootings on Sam Cooper Boulevard, where people just driving in their cars were targeted for seemingly no reason.
Yeah, that was chilling. And then there's the 2008 Lister Street murders.
I remember hearing about that case. It was just horrific. 6 people were killed, including children.
It was absolutely devastating. The details of that case are just brutal. The victims were stabbed and bludgeoned, and some of the children were even attacked.
It's hard to even fathom the level of violence that occurred that night. It must have completely traumatized the community.
It did. And the case really shook the nation. It put Memphis on the map for all the wrong reasons, and it became this symbol of urban violence and despair.
It's a stark reminder of the dark side of humanity. But beyond these individual incidents, the documentary also dives into the organized crime element in North Memphis. The gang presence there seems particularly strong.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Gang activity is a major factor in the overall climate of fear, and it's something that residents have to deal with on a daily basis.
The documentary kind of takes us inside this world, focusing on specific neighborhoods that have become infamous through rap lyrics and street lore.
It's this strange intersection of music and reality where what you hear in the songs is often a reflection of what's happening on the streets.
Like with rapper Yo Gotti, who talks about growing up in Ridgecrest apartments in the Fraser neighborhood.
Yeah, Yo Gotti's story is fascinating. He's become this successful rapper, but he doesn't shy away from his past. He often talks about his experiences growing up in poverty and being surrounded by crime.
And that authenticity is what resonates with so many people.
It is. It gives you a glimpse into the realities of life in those environments, and it challenges those stereotypical portrayals of gang life.
Besides Ridgecrest, the documentary mentions a bunch of other key areas in North Memphis, like Shady Vista, Hollywood, Watkins and Brown, and Herd Village. It can be kind of overwhelming trying to keep track of all the different neighborhoods.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. But I think the point the documentary is making is that these aren't just names on a map. These are communities with deep-rooted histories, often marked by poverty, crime, and the presence of these powerful gangs, like the Mickey Cobras and Vice Lords.
And their influence is undeniable. They shape the lives of so many people in these communities.
It's a reality that we can't ignore.
The documentary then shifts its focus to downtown Memphis, and it highlights this stark contrast between the tourist attractions and the persistent crime problem.
It's like there are these two sides to downtown Memphis. The one that visitors see with the music and the nightlife, and then the one that residents have to deal with on a daily basis.
So it's not just the rough neighborhoods that are affected.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
The documentary points out that downtown Memphis has a crime rate that's 47% higher than the national average.
47%. Wow, that's still pretty significant.
It is. You have a 1 in 8 chance of becoming a victim of crime there,
Yeah.
which can be pretty unsettling, especially if you're coming to Memphis expecting a carefree experience.
It definitely shatters the illusion that crime is confined to certain areas.
Yeah, and I think the documentary does a good job of diving into the history of downtown Memphis to show how economic shifts, urban decay, and revitalization efforts have all contributed to this complex crime landscape.
And speaking of downtown, you can't talk about Memphis without mentioning Beale Street.
Oh, absolutely. Beale Street is iconic.
But the documentary kind of exposes a darker side to this legendary music spot.
You know, Beale Street is like a microcosm of Memphis itself. It reflects the city's soul and vibrancy, but it also carries the weight of its past, including a history of racial injustice and violence.
Yeah, the documentary mentions Ida B. Wells, the journalist and activist who co-owned a newspaper on Beale Street in the late 1800s.
Right, and tragically, her printing press was destroyed by a white mob, and she was forced to flee Memphis.
It's a stark reminder that even in a place celebrated for its music and culture, there are these shadows of injustice.
It adds another layer of meaning to Beale Street, a reminder that the fight for equality is ongoing.
And of course, we can't forget about the tragic assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the Lorraine Motel in downtown Memphis.
Dr. King's death was a pivotal moment in American history, and the Lorraine Motel, which is now the National Civil Rights Museum, stands as a powerful reminder of his legacy and the ongoing struggle for civil rights.
It adds this layer of gravity to our exploration of Memphis, reminding us that its history is intertwined with this larger fight for social justice.
It's a reminder that the fight is far from over.
But even with these historical events downtown, Memphis still has its share of present-day gang activity and crime-ridden areas. It's a problem that seems to permeate every corner of the city.
Yeah, it's like this undercurrent that runs through everything.
The documentary shines a light on some of the notorious housing projects that were once hotbeds for gang activity.
Places like Dixie Homes, Claiborne Homes, and Foot Homes.
Dixie Homes was infamous, often mentioned in rap lyrics and media reports. It was eventually demolished and rebuilt into a mixed-income community called Legends Park.
Right. It was an attempt to break the cycle of poverty and crime by creating a more diverse and integrated community.
But it's a complex issue, right? Demolishing those housing projects also resulted in the displacement of many residents.
Yeah, there are always unintended consequences. It's a reminder that there are no easy solutions to these deep-rooted problems.
It makes you think about the complexities of urban renewal and how, even with the best intentions, there can be negative impacts.
It's about finding that balance between progress and preserving the fabric of a community.
The documentary then takes us to South Memphis, an area that's facing its own unique set of problems.
South Memphis is often overlooked, but it's an area that's been hit hard by economic decline and crime.
It's like peeling back the layers of the city, each with its own story to tell.
And one of those stories is about Parkway Village, a neighborhood with a crime rate that's a staggering 424% higher than the national average.
424%. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that means you have a 1 in 9 chance of becoming a victim of crime there.
It's hard to even wrap your head around those numbers.
It's a stark reminder of the harsh realities that people in these communities face every day.
And like some of the other neighborhoods we've discussed, Parkway Village experienced this dramatic demographic shift over the years.
Right. Originally, it was built as a predominantly white suburb in the 1950s and 1960s, but over time, middle-class families started moving out and disinvestment took hold.
So it's that familiar story of white flight and the resulting economic decline that we see in so many urban areas.
Exactly. And as the area became predominantly Black and Latino, it also became more susceptible to crime and poverty.
The documentary uses the story of the Mall of Memphis as a striking example of this decline.
Oh, the Mall of Memphis. That's a classic tale of the American dream gone wrong.
It was once a bustling center of commerce, but it eventually became known as the Mall of Murder due to the high levels of crime.
It became so dangerous that it was eventually closed and demolished, a stark symbol of the challenges facing Parkway Village.
It's a reminder that even places that were once symbols of prosperity can fall victim to neglect and decay.
It's a cautionary tale about the fragility of urban life.
The documentary also highlights Whitehaven and Orange Mound, two other South Memphis neighborhoods with really distinct stories.
They each represent different facets of the challenges facing the area.
Whitehaven is kind of an interesting case because it's home to Graceland, Elvis Presley's mansion, which attracts tourists from all over the world.
Yeah, it's this weird juxtaposition. You've got this iconic landmark that represents wealth and fame, but it's surrounded by communities that are struggling with poverty and crime.
It shows how those issues can exist side by side, even in a place that's known for its tourism and entertainment.
It's a reminder that those deeper societal problems don't just disappear because there's a famous landmark nearby.
Orange Mound, on the other hand, has this rich history as a Black-built neighborhood.
Yeah, Orange Mound is a really important part of Memphis's history. It was one of the first communities in the country developed specifically for Black residents.
It was a symbol of Black pride and self-sufficiency.
Exactly. But unfortunately, like many other Black communities, Orange Mound fell victim to poverty and violence, particularly during the crack epidemic of the 1980s and 1990s.
It's a story we see repeated in so many cities across America.
It's a reminder of the systemic inequalities that have plagued Black communities for generations and the devastating impact of the drug war on those communities.
And just like North Memphis, South Memphis has a significant gang presence that contributes to the cycle of crime.
Unfortunately, it's something that affects every part of the city.
The documentary points to specific areas like Walker Homes, which is connected to Grammy-nominated rapper Moneybagg.
And Lemoyne Gardens, which is known for its connection to the love-murdering gangsters.
Those names alone are pretty chilling.
They are, and they speak to the very real dangers that people in these communities face every day.
To really drive home the pervasiveness of the problem, the documentary does this rapid-fire rundown of other key areas in South Memphis like South Parkway, Cane Creek Apartments, Third World, and Castilia Heights.
It's like they're saying, look, This isn't just isolated to a few places. This is a widespread issue that's affecting the entire city.
And no discussion of South Memphis would be complete without mentioning the tragic story of young Dolph, the rapper who was killed in 2021.
Young Dolph's story is both inspiring and heartbreaking. He rose from poverty in Castilla Heights to achieve stardom as a rapper.
He was known for his philanthropy and his deep connection to his community. But he was also caught in this long-running feud with fellow Memphis rapper Yo Gotti.
And that feud ultimately led to his tragic death.
It's a reminder that even success doesn't provide an escape from the dangers and inequalities that plague these communities.
It's a story that really gets to the heart of what this documentary is about. The struggle for success, the ever-present threat of violence, and the systemic issues that create these cycles of poverty and crime.
It's a lot to unpack, and we'll be diving deeper into Young Dolph's story and the broader context of these issues in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, because it's only going to get more intense from here. Dolph's story really captures that mix of ambition and the shadow of violence that kind of hangs over Memphis. The documentary does a great job laying out his journey from poverty to stardom and how he stayed connected to his roots.
Yeah, you see him giving back, visiting schools, supporting local businesses. It makes his death hit even harder, you know? Killed while buying cookies at a bakery he used to go to.
Makes you think about the cost of success and how some rivalries can go way too far.
Over 100 bullets. It's insane.
Yeah, and the documentary follows how the suspects in Dolph's murder were eventually caught and charged. It was a huge case. Everyone was following it.
Right. 3 men were involved. Justin Johnson, Cornelius Smith, and Hernandez Goen.
And the trial revealed some really disturbing details.
Like what?
Well, Smith testified that Goen told him about a $100,000 hit on Dolph, supposedly ordered by Yo Gotti's brother.
Whoa.
He described the whole plan, and it's chilling, the level of ruthlessness involved.
And the fact that Smith claimed he only got a fraction of that money makes it even more tragic. Like, what was it all for?
Dolph's story is a tragedy, but it also highlights those bigger societal issues we were talking about.
The poverty, the lack of opportunity, this cycle of violence that's so hard to break.
It's a reminder that success isn't always a shield. But even with the darkness, the documentary doesn't leave you completely despairing, right?
Yeah, there's this thread of resilience, of hope running through it.
People working to make a difference, artists speaking out, those everyday acts of kindness that hold a community together.
One thing that really hit home was the economic disparity in Memphis. You see how poverty and unemployment fuel that cycle of crime.
Absolutely. It's not just about individual choices, it's the systems that create those inequalities.
Like the closure of those factories, the harvester plant we talked about. People lose their jobs, they struggle to make ends meet, and crime becomes an option, unfortunately.
Yes. It's heartbreaking hearing residents talk about the lack of guidance for young people today. They remember a time when things felt safer, when there was more community support.
That loss of community is a huge factor.
When those connections break down, it's harder to address the underlying issues.
The documentary also touches on racial inequality in Memphis. It's hard to ignore that the most disadvantaged neighborhoods are predominantly Black and Latino.
Yeah, you can't talk about these challenges without acknowledging the impact of racism, segregation, discriminatory housing policies, mass incarceration. They've created deep inequalities.
It's a nationwide problem, not just a Memphis problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And the documentary makes you think about those systemic issues.
What responsibility we have as outsiders to do more than just listen to the music or visit the tourist spots.
To be mindful consumers, to challenge those narratives we're fed, to seek out diverse perspectives.
To realize that behind the statistics, there are real people whose lives are impacted by these issues.
That's what's so effective about this documentary. It humanizes the issue of crime in Memphis. By sharing those personal stories, it allows us to connect with those people, to feel their struggles.
It's not just about sensationalizing crime scenes, it's about understanding the root causes.
And working towards solutions that actually address those underlying issues.
Fostering empathy and understanding, recognizing that we're all connected.
You know, something that struck me was how the documentary uses music to tell the story.
Yeah. It's not just background music, it's woven into the whole narrative.
You've got classic blues and soul, contemporary hip-hop, reflecting that evolution of Memphis music.
It's a reminder that music can be so powerful, invoking emotions, connecting us to a place.
Like when they show Beale Street, you hear that blues music drifting through the air. You're right there.
Transported back in time.
And it shows how music can transcend boundaries, connect people. Even in the midst of hardship, that music shines through, a glimmer of hope.
The documentary also explores how music both perpetuates and challenges those stereotypes about Memphis.
Right, some rap music has glorified violence and gang culture, adding to a certain image.
But there are artists like Young Dolph who use their platform to speak about their experiences, to offer a different perspective,
A counter-narrative to those simplistic portrayals we often see.
showing the complexity of the city, the resilience of the people, the power of art to inspire change.
Dolph's music resonated because it was authentic, it was real. He spoke to the struggles of growing up in poverty.
And that's powerful. It allows people to connect on a deeper level, to feel seen.
And we need to support those artists who are telling those stories, shedding light on those issues, inspiring change.
Art can be a powerful tool for social commentary and change.
Especially in Memphis, where music is so deeply ingrained.
Another interesting theme was that tension between old and new in Memphis, preserving its past while embracing the future.
A city in transition, right. Trying to find that balance.
And sometimes, communities feel left behind, displaced by development.
The documentary shows the impact of those changes, both good and bad. It makes you think about urban development and making sure growth benefits everyone.
Progress shouldn't come at the cost of entire communities.
Exactly. And the documentary also raises questions about tourism in Memphis. Millions of visitors come each year.
But are the benefits shared equally? Are the voices of residents being truly represented?
It's a call for more mindful and responsible tourism.
To be aware of the impact, both positive and negative.
To remember that behind those attractions, there are real people whose lives are intertwined with the city.
To go beyond the surface, to connect with the soul of Memphis and its people.
To see those multiple layers, those multiple narratives.
To dig deeper, to listen to the residents, to understand those complexities.
That's what makes the documentary so compelling. It challenges us to question those narratives we're told, to seek a deeper understanding.
So even though it focuses on the darker side of Memphis, the crime, the poverty,
It doesn't leave you feeling totally hopeless.
there's that thread of hope, that belief in resilience, in the power of community.
People fighting to make a difference, those acts of kindness that hold everything together.
And the documentary's visual storytelling is incredibly effective too. They capture the grit, but also the beauty that still exists.
Those stunning shots of the river, the murals, the energy of Beale Street. It's a reminder that even in struggle, there's life, beauty, hope.
And they do it without romanticizing or sensationalizing, just presenting an honest portrayal.
Letting the viewer draw their own conclusions, it's that honesty that makes it so powerful.
Not shying away from the truth, but never losing sight of that human element.
The resilience, the beauty that exists alongside the pain.
A reminder that every place has a story to tell.
And those stories deserve to be heard in all their complexity and nuance.
It's a call to look beyond the surface, to dig deeper.
And sometimes in those gritty stories, we find the most profound truths.
It's in those vulnerable, honest moments that we connect with each other.
This documentary gave me a lot to think about, both about Memphis and those challenges facing cities all over.
It's a reminder that behind every statistic, there's a person, a life, impacted by these issues.
It's easy to get lost in numbers, but this documentary brings those numbers to life.
It's a call to action, to engage with these communities, to work towards real solutions.
Solutions that address those root causes.
True change comes from empathy, understanding, and a willingness to see beyond the surface.
Recognizing our shared humanity, working together for a more just and equitable world.
And that's what makes it so powerful. It's not just entertainment. It's a catalyst for conversation, for awareness, for action.
Challenging us to be more than just observers.
To be present, to be aware, to learn from the experiences of others.
To be open to those stories, the ones that challenge us, the ones that connect us.
And to remember that even the difficult stories can shape us, inform us, inspire us.
We all have a role to play in building the world we want to live in.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. This deep dive into Memphis, we've seen a lot, from those tough crime stats to those personal stories of people facing violence, poverty, and the weight of history.
It really makes you think it's not just about the music, is it? We've seen how history, economics, those systemic inequalities all play a part in what Memphis is going through today.
It's a complex picture, for sure.
Yeah.
We've seen the dark side, the
And
struggles,
heartache.
but even with all that, there's this glimmer of hope.
Oh, yeah.
The
Definitely.
resilience of those people, how strong their community is, that belief in a better future, it's inspiring.
It makes you realize Memphis is so much more than just those headlines about crime.
It's a city full of stories, full of human experience, and it deserves our understanding, not just judgment.
Really does. And as we wrap up, it makes you think about how we as outsiders can engage with places like Memphis in a way that actually matters.
Right, it's easy to just listen to the music, maybe visit Graceland, without really grappling with those complexities. We can't just be passive observers, right? What can we do to actually help?
I think awareness is a big first step. And this documentary does a great job of that, showing the human cost of those issues.
Educating ourselves about the history, the inequalities, those root causes,
And then finding ways to get involved.
like donating to organizations that are working on the ground in Memphis.
Exactly. Supporting those groups that are combating poverty, fighting crime.
We'll make sure to put some links in the show notes for this episode.
Good idea. And
And
even beyond donating, just having those conversations with friends and family, raising awareness, challenging those stereotypes, that can make a difference.
being a more conscious consumer, too. Supporting businesses and artists who are making a positive impact.
Putting your money where your values are, right? Choosing ethical tourism options, investing in art and music that uplifts those communities.
So as we end this deep dive into Memphis, we want to leave you with this question. How are you going to engage with these issues?
What steps are you going to take to be part of the solution?
Remember, even small actions can add up. Being informed, being engaged, using your voice, making conscious choices.
It all contributes to making a difference.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope it's made you curious, challenged your thinking, and inspired you to take action.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
And that's a wrap for this deep dive. See you next time.